A blistering wind swept across the endless crimson dunes of Eridrax, hurling grains of sand that hissed like a swarm of scorpions. Under the twin sun's glare, the higher orb a molten gold, the lower a bruised purple, the desert stretched, in all directions broken only by the blackened carcass of an ancient warship half buried at the rim of a yawning canyon. At the canyon's lip, two small forms lay bound, their limbs twisted and shimmering with alien restraint. Zephyr, no larger than a human child, had scales the color of midnight sky, flecked with cobalt veins glowing faintly in the heat. Beside him, Ember's scales burned a deep crimson, her slender neck arching in agitation. Both cubs were barely clinging to consciousness. Their mother, Myathra, last of the Ashantide brood, had been their protector and teacher, guiding them across the desert in search of the hidden springs. But 3 days ago, a spear of plasma light had crackled from the sky, scorching Myathra's flank and sending her reeling into the dunes. Before Zephyr and Ember could react, the raiding clan's warship had descended. They had watched, paralyzed by terror, as their mother had defended them with a roar that shook the canyon walls, and had fallen beneath the enemy's merciless weaponry. Zephyr's wings, too weak to lift him, twitched against the scalding sand. His sapphire eyes, half-lidded with pain, flicked nervously toward the horizon. Ember, louder of the two, spat a tiny gout of flame that sizzled against her own bindings, melting the cords only enough to singe her nostrils. She hissed in fury, her first act of rebellion, then collapsed in a wheezing fit. Above, the giant sand vultures began their descent, their leathery wings blotting out the smaller sun. They circled like death incarnate, razor-tipped beaks glinting. In moments they would feast on living flesh, but the desert was not devoid of hope. Far beyond the canyon, Lyra Xanthi's rover crawled over the dunes, its inertial stabilizers groaning under the harsh terrain. Lyra hunched in the cockpit, sweat beating at her temples despite the exosuit's cooling gel. Her visor's HUD traced the migratory route of the sand whales, but a new blip, 2 erratic heat signatures, flashed on her scanner. They were faint but unmistakable, life forms at temperatures no human could survive unaided. Lyra forced the rover to a stop. Switching off the engine's hum, she peered through tinted glass at the empty wastes. 2 small dragons, she murmured into her comm pad. I'm coming in. She exited the rover, her boots sinking into the fine sand. The exosuit hissed as it adjusted temperature controls, and her staff, an heirloom from her academy days, unfurled at her side. Its tip glowed with a soft cerulean pulse. She had retrofitted it with a molecular severing array years ago. Tonight, it might be the only thing standing between salvation and slaughter. Pushing through the wind, Lyra crested the canyon's edge. Below her, the cubs lay motionless, the silver cords binding them contrasting starkly with the ruddy sands. The vultures had landed, their clawed feet scraping as they edged closer, intent on the spoils. Lyra's pulse raced. She activated the staff's cloaking field, wrapping herself in a shell of warped light. With careful steps, she descended into the canyon, each footfall muffled against the sand. The air grew hotter, the reek of fear almost tangible. Zephyr stirred, flickering a shuddering breath through shallow ribs. Ember twitched an ear, nostrils flaring. Both glanced up at the intruder, but their captor's warship still hovered unseen, motionless on the canyon's opposite rim. The cubs' terror surged, their young minds unable to comprehend rescue. Lyra knelt beside them. Shh, it's okay. I've got you. Her voice was soft but carried authority, dulled by the helmet's comm filter. She extended a gloved hand toward Zephyr's muzzle. His cobalt eyes searched hers, warily curious. With a flick of her staff, the cords dissolved. In a mist of silvery particles, Zephyr collapsed free, wings limp. Ember tumbled next, scrabbling to her feet with a croaking hiss. Lyra produced vials of rehydration gel and pressed one to each cub's lips. They drank with desperate gulps, the gel's cool fluid soothing, burning throats. A high-pitched squawk from overhead snapped Lyra's attention skyward. A sand vulture had taken flight again, alarmed by her presence. The others followed. She glanced toward the canyon's mouth. The raiding warship's hatch yawned open, but its ramp remained unused. Calorth's absence was an enigma. "No time to waste," Lyra whispered. She ruffled Zephyr's mane gently, then turned to lead them toward the only sanctuary she knew, an underground spring hidden beneath the eastern dunes. Ember, tail flicking with new life energy, followed closely. Zephyr limped but kept pace. Behind them, the vultures circled, impatient. Above, the desert sky pulsed with the dying light of the twin suns. Bound by hope and desperation, Lyra and the two dragon cubs melted into the vast red sea of Eridrax, forging an unlikely bond that would shape the fate of worlds. As they disappeared, among the shifting dunes, the carcass of the fallen warship on the canyon rim gleamed, a silent monument to cruelty. But below its shadow, life still fought to endure. And in the heart of the desert's cruel expanse, salvation had arrived. A cold wind rose as the twin suns slipped below the western horizon, plunging Eridrax's crimson sands into half-light. Lyra Xanthe led the two dragon cubs, Zephyr limping, Ember's wings drooping, across the rolling dunes toward a hidden oasis she had charted weeks ago. Her exosuit's sensors flickered as sand scrabbled at the thruster's stabilizers, but she pressed on, aware that every moment counted. Behind her, Zephyr cast wary glances at the darkening sky. Each gust of wind threatened to kick up stinging sand that would scald the cub's delicate scales. Ember trotted close, her breath coming in raspy huffs. Lyra knelt beside them, opening her pack to produce 2 gelatinous nutrient bars. "Here," she murmured, offering Zephyr the first. He snuffled at it cautiously, then greedily tore off a corner. Ember followed suit, crunching through the fortified crust to reveal rich proteins designed for extreme climates. As they ate, Lyra scanned the horizon. No sign of Calorth's warship, yet the distant dunes seemed unnaturally still. She rose and motioned for them to follow. "There's a crevice just beyond that ridge," she said, voice calm but urgent. "It leads to a cavern with thermal vents and fresh water." Stealing their resolve, Lyra led the small party onward. The crevice yawned like a silent sentinel, half concealed by a curtain of shifting sand. Inside, steam hissed from fissures in the rock wall, mingling with the cooling air into a soft mist. The cavern floor was littered with smooth stones and pools of lukewarm water. Lyra knelt at the nearest pool, using her staff's sensor tip to verify purity before dipping a vial into the gently steaming liquid. She smiled as she offered it to Ember, whose flaming nostrils flared in surprise at the soothing warmth. "Drink," Lyra encouraged. Ember lapped eagerly, scales rippling with renewed vigor. Zephyr followed, his wings barely moving as he slaked his thirst. While they drank, Lyra unstrapped a compact heating coil and affixed it around Ember's singed wing, regulating the temperature to prevent tissue damage. She then applied a cooling gel to Zephyr's throat, where sand inhaled during their flight had inflamed his trachea. "There," she said softly. "That should help you both rest." As Ember settled beside the steam, Fenton Zephyr curled around her wing. Lyra activated her helmet's holodisplay. She reviewed the life signatures she had originally detected: sand whales migrating north, and Kelikon herds grazing near the polar plateau, and 2 erratic heat sources shrinking as they fled. On a secondary screen, the warship's transponder blipped momentarily, then went dark. "Suspicious," Lyra muttered. "He's hunting us." While the cubs slept, Lyra allowed herself a moment to reflect. She removed her helmet, letting her dark hair tumble loose. Memories of the academy, vibrant corridors of research labs, arguments over bioethics, the time she'd smuggled a hatchling Sylpharian onto campus, surfaced with bittersweet clarity. Back then, dragons were nearly mythic, creatures of legend that only a few scholars dared to study. Lyra's fascination had cost her a scholarship. She'd bridged forbidden research on dragon kinship and human empathic bonds. Now here she was, protector of 2 fledgling dragons on the deadliest planet in the quadrant. A low rumble shook the cavern. Lyra's reflexes kicked in, She grabbed her staff and pressed her back against the cool rock. Ember stirred, hissing, softly. Zephyr's eyes snapped open. In the dim light, Lyra saw embers of magma deep within the vent glow brighter. The rumble intensified, and sand cascaded from the crevice's entrance, as if something massive clawed its way closer. Lyra's HUD pinged, unauthorized approach, multiple signatures converging. Not sand whales. They were too large and glacial slow. This was mechanical, deliberate. She vaulted to her feet, staff glowing into full power mode. "Wake up," she whispered, but Ember and Zephyr were already alert, their instincts honed to danger. A narrow beam of external light stabbed into the cavern, artificial, precise. In the gloaming, the silhouette of Kalorth's scout drone appeared, hovering at the mouth of the crevice. Its optical sensors glowed red, scanning. Lyra flared her staff's cloaking array, rippling the light around her and the cubs. The drone blinked, recalibrated, then swept its searchlight in lazy arcs. Lyra felt embers trembling at her side. "Stay close," she murmured. She knelt and fitted a tiny comm beacon behind each cub's wing, a tracker and distress beacon that would call for help the moment they reached safe orbit. She hoped the galactic enforcers, always eager to capture war criminals, would act on the signal. The drone's light fell upon Lyra's exosuit, then flared in recognition. Its hull panels shifted, weapons deploying from hidden bays. Through her visor, Lyra saw the ominous pulse of a microplasma cannon charging. She grasped Ember's side protectively, Zephyr pressing his head into her knee. Time slowed. Lyra activated an acoustic disruptor on her staff, sending a high-frequency pulse that rattled the drone's sensors. Sparks flew as it staggered, then its weapons retracted. In that moment of confusion, Lyra sprang forward, dragging the cubs into a deeper recess. She slammed her boot onto a lever set into the floor, one of her fail-safe mechanisms, triggering a rock slide that sealed the cavern mouth. Dust and pebbles thudded as the entrance collapsed, leaving only darkness and the hiss of steam. Lyra pressed a hand to Ember's flank. "Safe," she whispered, though her heart pounded. Beneath the rubble, the drone beat against the new barrier, its muffled whine a reminder that Kalorth was never far behind. As Lyra settled against the stone wall, dragons cradled in her arms, the cavern's heat and fog closed around them like a sanctuary. Outside, Eridrax's night sky bloomed with alien constellations. Inside, an unlikely family held its breath, bound by fate and the promise of tomorrow's journey. The heat of Eridrax's day seldom relented, even under the veil of dawn's first light. Lyra Xanthe emerged from the steaming cavern with Zephyr and Ember nestled against her chest in a woven sling of biogel. The sand beneath her boots hissed and steamed as if urging her onward. All around rose the dunes, towering waves of ochre and blood red, stretching toward a sky still tinged with violet. Lyra consulted her wrist console. The distress beacon she'd planted behind the cubs' wings had transmitted their signals. Galactic Enforcer patrols were inbound, ETA 2 hours. But Kalorth's drone, now irreparably damaged, would have alerted his warship to their location. He would arrive faster. There was no time to wait for reinforcements. She scanned the horizon. Far off, carved into a ridge, glinted the corrugated hull of Kalorth's ship. Its engines dripped molten sand as it stabilized, its ramp already descending in slow arcs. Ahead lay a narrow pass between towering dunes, a natural choke point. It would be their battlefield. Lyra set the cubs down. Zephyr's sapphire eyes met hers, emboldened by the sanctuary they'd shared. Ember flexed her wings, small sparks dancing at the corners of her maw. Lyra offered a reassuring smile. "Ready?" They responded with a chorus of soft roars. They moved as a trio. Lyra's boots cutting arcs into the sand, Ember leading with a low growl, Zephyr close behind her flank. As they skirted the pass's lip, Lyra activated her staff's pulse emitter, a whip-thin line of sharpened energy at her side. She calibrated it to draw Kalorth's attention. Below, dunes shifted in sudden clouds of sand, the approach of armored riders. Kalorth's mercenaries, twin suns reflecting off their helmets, galloped atop mechanized sand bikes, plasma rifles slung across their backs. At their head strode Kalorth himself, tall, skeletal, his crimson eyes blazing with triumph. Lyra raised her staff. "Wait for it." The mercenaries charged into the pass, the ground trembling beneath them. Sand erupted at their wheels, their shouts drowned in mechanical whines. Ember growled low. Zephyr's throat pulsed in a warning chant. At Lyra's signal, Ember inhaled deeply and unleashed a torrent of flame. The conflagration swept the narrow pass, the walls of sand glowing orange as riders veered wildly to avoid being burned. Behind Ember's blaze, Lyra sprang forward, energy whip lashing out. She snagged the lead bike's front strut, yanking it sideways. The rider tumbled into the churned sands and was quickly enveloped by Zephyr's vorpal scream, a piercing sound wave that folded the mercenary into cover, ears bleeding, disoriented. Kalorth leapt from his mount, plasma pistol already humming. Lyra parried his bolt with the staff's deflection field, metal sizzling. She spun, sending a tendril of energy to disarm him. The pistol flew from his grasp and buried itself in the sand. Ember darted forward, jaws snapping, but Lyra caught her wrist. "Not yet," she hissed. Kalorth snarled and lunged. Lyra sidestepped, planting a foot on his back. With a downward swing, she brought the staff's pommel down against his spine. A shock reverberated through his exosuit and he collapsed, gasping. Zephyr crouched atop a dune, throat rippling as he unleashed another scream, keeping the remaining mercs at bay. Lyra placed a knee on Kalorth's chest and pressed the tip of her staff to his neck. "You lost," she said, her voice steady, but cold. Ember landed next to Lyra and nudged Kalorth's arm, wings flicking embers across the sands. "Your warship is disabled," Lyra continued. "Your crimes are broadcast across the quadrant thanks to your own drone." She tapped her wrist console. On its screen scrolled messages from enforcer vessels on pursuit. Kalorth spat out a curse, blood trickling from his lip. "You'll pay for this." Lyra withdrew her staff. "No," she replied. "You'll answer for this." She signaled to Ember and Zephyr. Ember's flames curled protectively around Lyra's feet, while Zephyr's wings flared in victory. Together, they formed a living barrier between the conqueror and the vengeance of the desert. Behind them, the mercenaries surrendered, dropping their weapons. In the pink-gold haze of dawn, Lyra bound Kalorth's wrists with the same silvery cords he had used on the cubs. Only these would not dissolve until his exoneration by the enforcers. She took a deep breath, swallowing the adrenaline. As the sound of approaching ships grew faint in the distance, Lyra turned to her companions. Ember nudged Lyra's thigh, and Zephyr nudged Ember, an unspoken promise of trust. Lyra knelt to, scratched Zephyr behind the ear, then wrapped an arm around Ember's slender neck. "You two did brilliantly," she whispered. "Now, let's get you home." High above, circling the pass, distant patrol lights winked into view. On the sands, below, a human and 2 dragon cubs stood triumphant, a bond forged in the heart of a cruel desert, unbreakable and bright as dragonfire. The first rays of Eridrax's morning suns crept over the eastern dunes, bathing the hidden oasis in gentle golds and purples. Beneath a canopy of phosphorescent palms, Lyra Xanthi knelt beside the crystalline pool, watching Zephyr and Ember at play. Their scales shimmered in the dawn light, Zephyr's deep sapphire, Ember's burnished crimson, each ripple of muscle a testament to their newfound health. Behind her, the thrum of engines grew louder. Lyra looked up to see 2 sleek galactic enforcer patrol ships descending, their hulls gleaming against the desert sky. Soldiers in white and blue armor disembarked, weapons holstered in respectful salute as they approached the oasis. At their vanguard strode Commander Soren Hale, whose stern face softened when he saw the dragon cubs. "Lyra Xanthi," he greeted, voice low but warm. "The quadrant thanks you." He gestured toward the nearby dunes where Kalorth lay bound in an energy net, watched by 2 enforcers. "We recovered his warship, disabled beyond repair, and your evidence has already initiated proceedings against his entire cartel. Lyra rose, brushing sand from her exosuit. Ember padded forward, tail flicking in curiosity, and Zephyr donned a wary stance. Commander Hale knelt to their level. "These are the first Ashentide hatchlings rescued in over a millennium," he murmured, reverence in his tone. "The Council is eager to assure their survival." Ember's wings unfurled in a proud stretch. Zephyr emitted a soft, contented trill. Lyra allowed herself a small smile. "They'll need a sanctuary," she said. "Somewhere they can grow and learn. I know of a hidden vale beyond the northern polar plateau, a place of thermal pools and floating lagoons. The dragons there are peaceful." Hale nodded. "We'll secure a protected perimeter, and we'd like you to oversee their care." He handed Lyra a data tablet. "Your research into dragon kinships could guide the establishment of a conservation preserve. The Council will fund it." As enforcers began dismantling Kalorth's net and surveying the wreckage of his shuttle, Lyra activated her comlink. "A transport shuttle bearing nursery specialists and ecological engineers will arrive in 48 hours, she relayed. Ember chirped, nudging the tablet from Lyra's grasp and batting it into the pool, where it floated like a lily pad, until Lyra retrieved it with a laugh. Night's chill still lingered in the air, but Lyra felt warmth suffuse her chest. She crouched, letting Zephyr and Ember nuzzle her cheeks. "You two are remarkable," she whispered. "You survived cruelty. Now you'll thrive." Commander Hale straightened and offered his hand. Lyra shook it. "We owe you our lives," she said. Hale inclined his head. "You only did what was right. The galaxy needs more like you." As the patrol ships departed, casting cooling shadows across the palms, Lyra led the cubs to the water's edge. She knelt to place her hand on Zephyr's flank, then Ember's neck, feeling the pulse of their hearts. Steady, strong, alive. Beyond the oasis, the dunes glittered like an ocean, vast and untamed. "I'll show you the way home," Lyra promised. "To your ancestors' lands, and to the skies you're meant to conquer." Zephyr stretched his wings, wide enough now, to catch the morning breeze while Ember curled around Lyra's arm, warm and trusting. Together they stepped out of the sanctuary of palms, their silhouettes framed by the twin suns as they climbed the dunes toward a future unwritten. On Eridrax, cruelty had left 2 dragon cubs to die. But hope had found them, and under a new dawn, their story was only beginning.